The Paladin, a mainstay in RPG classes, is a phenomenal build for an adventure across the land of Morrowind. Adept with both blade and spell, the Paladin can make short work of the evils of the undead and bring divine wrath down upon the forces of Dagothur. From a gameplay perspective, the Paladin is incredibly powerful, using heavy armor for defense, long blade and destruction magic for offense, and restore magic for both defense and for powerful buffs to your other skills. In this video, I'll outline how to set up the build, what playstyle works best with it, what factions to join, and how best to roleplay the character, if that's your thing, of course. If you're new to Morrowind and you're looking for more of a beginner's guide, please check out my Ultimate Beginner's Guide to Morrowind video, linked above and in the description. It outlines a lot of the basics that I might gloss over in this video, and will really help you feel more comfortable diving into this game, and more importantly, sticking with it. And if you like this video, or any of my other ones, consider subscribing to my channel. I'm still pretty new to the YouTube scene, and trying to grow and improve as I go. And please, let me know in the comments if you'd like any particular build showcased on this channel. I hope to make many more, as well as some mod showcases and challenge runs. I love this game, and I really just want more people to play it and to grow the Morrowind community. And please, my actual friends can't take me talking about this game anymore, and I gotta talk to some other folks about it. With that out of the way, let's get into how to craft the divine warrior known as the Paladin, starting with race, skills, and birthsign. Starting off, we'll be going with what may seem like an unconventional choice, but Nord is actually a really good pick for our race. I did some initial playtesting with Breton, and the magic and racial bonuses are great, but the lack of initial combat skills was really tough at the beginning of the game. Nord has a great spread of stats and solid racial abilities, and not to mention resistances that can beef you up a little bit at the early stages of the game. Magical skills are also a lot easier to train than most combat skills, so the Nord's initial lack of magical potential can be easily mitigated. You can of course customize your character however you like, but I'm going with a bit of a seasoned and gruff looking individual. I'll outline my reasoning later on in the role-playing section of the video. I have some more face options than normal because I'm using Tamriel Data, one of the mods necessary to run Tamriel Rebuilt, a mod that I can't recommend enough. If you're all curious as to what mods I'm running, I'll leave links to them in the description. They're all very vanilla friendly and only change things like game stability, minor quality of life stuff, and the lands added by Tamriel Rebuilt and its sister projects. For class, we'll be making a custom class. While there are preset classes like Crusader and Pilgrim that get close to the idea of what I'm going for, they aren't quite optimized in my opinion. We'll specialize in combat, which will provide 5 additional points to combat-focused skills, as well as faster level-up times. For our preferred attributes, we'll be going with Strength and Endurance. Strength so that we'll both have a higher hit chance and a higher damage with our long blades, and Endurance to increase our starting health and fatigue. Both of these attributes will receive a plus 10 bonus due to our preference pick. Now it's time to pick major and minor skills. Putting something in the major skills category will give it a starting proficiency of 30 out of 100, and putting something in the minor skills category will give it a starting proficiency of 15 out of 100. Not including your racial bonuses, those will be added on at the end. For major skills, we'll be going with Longblade, Athletics, Restoration, Heavy Armor, and Destruction. Longblade will be our primary damage dealer, with Destruction used for long-range enemies and to start engagements, like casting a damage over time fire spell right as you enter combat to give you that extra little bit of tick damage during engagements. Athletics will help us with our movement speed, which will be very important since we're wearing heavy armor. Speaking of, heavy armor will be our primary form of defense during combat engagements, and we'll want to always be wearing the best armor we can find. Restoration will be a key skill, for both utility and role-playing. This will act as the source of our divine magic, which is the component of the build that separates the Paladin from any other form of spell sword. Restoration governs most of the buff spells in Morrowind, and we'll primarily be using it to restore our health and fatigue, as well as increasing our combat potential by fortifying both our strength and endurance attributes, making us not only harder to kill, but also allow us to deal a considerable amount more damage per attack. We'll also be able to create spells that cure diseases on both ourselves and NPCs. The task of curing creatures or people affected by various diseases comes up across multiple quests and quest lines. Therefore, it's very thematic to use our restoration magic as a conduit to the divine, allowing us to cleanse people with our touch. These skills will be our bread and butter, and we'll want them as high as possible right out the gate. An important aspect to understand about Morrowind is that almost everything you do in the game is a dice roll, from damage to casting magic to even hitting your enemy. The higher your skills level is, the more likely you are to succeed at the activities that use them. That's an incredibly brief overview, but again, for much more in-depth understanding of the game, please check out my beginner's guide. For minor skills, we're going to go with Speechcraft, Alteration, Alchemy, Acrobatics, and Block. Speechcraft is more of a role-playing skill than utility skill, as Morrowind's reputation system with NPCs can be broken instantly with bribes. But I think that a notable characteristic of the Paladin is their charisma. I mean, they literally use the charisma stat in D&D to cast spells. But it's more than that. Paladins are meant to inspire others, to raise people up from their darkest depths, and that takes charisma. Alteration will be used for unlocking doors and chests instead of using the lockpicking skill. You won't be able to get around going through locked doors in dungeons or in other various quests, and sometimes there isn't a key readily available. It feels odd to have a paladin using lockpicking, which is traditionally a thief skill, so casting unlock spells is a better choice. You can think of it as using their divine magic to will the door open. Alchemy will be very important due to our Birthsign choice, which I'll explain momentarily. We'll want to be able to make Restore Magicka potions to have at the ready during quests and combat engagements. Alchemy also levels up very quickly, so I didn't feel the need to include it in the major skill section. Acrobatics will allow us to jump higher, but trust me, it helps with the movement a lot, and generally makes the character feel better while in motion. Without it, heavy armored characters feel too clunky for my taste. And finally, the block skill. We'll be mostly using two-handed long blades, so I've included block as a minor skill instead of a major skill, just to have some flexibility if the need arises. You can absolutely substitute this skill out for something like armor to better repair your own gear, or even enchanting to better utilize enchanted items. For our birth sign, we're going to go with the Atronach sign. This provides spell absorption for 50 points on self, 2 times intelligence points on self, which basically means you'll get double the magicka that you would have at base. But you'll receive the stunted magicka debuff, which means you cannot regenerate magicka by resting, only by potion and shrine blessing. This is probably the strongest birth sign you can pick, but the stunted magicka debuff can be pretty annoying to deal with. However, it should fit our build quite well, because we can use our alchemy skill to make potions, as well as use shrine blessings to restore our magicka, which is pretty on theme for a paladin. Okay, now we have a good idea of how to set up our paladin's initial race, abilities, and stats, but how do we actually play as a paladin? The Paladin playstyle is a mix of heavy-hitting long blade and destruction damage coupled with stat buffs and powerful damage resist. During any combat encounter, you'll want to use your restoration spells to buff your strength, endurance, health, or stamina. You can then soften up your opponents with some long-range destruction spells before charging in with your long blade to finish them off. You'll want to use your weapon as the bulk of your damage, keeping your magicka pools in reserve to recast buffs. Your destruction damage should be more of an opening attack or of a way to deal with long-range enemies, not your primary source of damage. Your heavy armor will help mitigate any physical damage, and your Atronach birth sign will reduce any spell damage by 50%, including any reflect damage. Unfortunately, many enemies have reflect as an ability, which causes a percentage of your spell attack damage to be redirected at you. However, with the Atronach sign, as well as some additional gear that I will recommend later in the video, this issue becomes almost entirely irrelevant. We'll use alchemy to restore our magicka during or after combat, as well as restore health and fatigue potions to keep us on our feet and sword swinging until the evil that we face is driven from this land. I almost wanted to recommend mysticism as well, using absorb health as a damage dealing spell because it circumvents the reflect ability. You just absorb your own health so no damage is done to you technically, but that just doesn't fit thematically with a paladin. It feels almost vampiric in nature. Don't worry, we'll be plenty overpowered once this build is fully up and going. Towards the endgame or at higher levels, with all of our skills in sync, we'll basically feel like a holy Wolverine, constantly regenerating our health, magic, and fatigue, slicing and dicing our way through enemies with our blade, and using divine magic to drastically increase our stats and burn away the taint of the undead from Red Mountain and beyond. But understanding the mechanics of the Paladin playstyle is only half the story. To really get into a character in any RPG, you need to also include a role-playing aspect. What is your character's motivation? Why do they fight? Why are they here? What are their goals? Thinking about these things allows you to not only better stick with a character, but also have that character stick with you. I still remember characters I built over 15 years ago because I developed their backstory and kept their motivation in mind with every decision I made. But hey, the most important thing is to have fun, so play however you want, absolutely no pressure. I'm just happy if folks can keep playing one of my favorite games of all time. So let's dive into the backstory of our paladin, Alexander Enderson. And yes, that is a Hellsing Ultimate reference for anyone interested. Born in the Karth River Valley in western Skyrim to a Breton father and Nord mother, Alexander had a fairly normal childhood, at least by Skyrim standards. Hunting in the spring and summer, foraging in the fall, and keeping the fire of the family hearth roaring in the harsh winters. It was a simple life. Alexander's father was originally a merchant that had come to Karthwasten many years ago from eastern High Rock, where the Druidak Mountains loomed tall in the sky. While traveling with his cart, he was set upon by a pack of feral wolves. Not being much of a warrior himself, he drew his dagger and tried to stand his ground, when from out of nowhere, a shield maiden appeared, slashing through the wolves and driving the survivors into the hills. The merchant was immediately smitten with this Valkyrie of a woman, and the shield maiden found his earnest nature endearing. Not long after, the two were wed and settled down in Karthwasten, choosing to keep the shield maiden's name of Ender, as she was from a long line of proud warriors. They had their first child, Alexander, named for the merchant's father, and a second child 3 years later, named Freya, after the shield maiden's mother. Being in a proper Nordic settlement, they were worshippers of the old Nordic pantheon, specifically Kine, mother of the sky. But not long after Alexander's 12th year, a plague swept through the town, killing both children's parents and many, many others. During the onslaught of the sickness, Members of the Imperial cult then came to town, and through their connection to the Divines, healed those they could, saving the population from utter destruction. Alexander saw the Imperial cult as his and Freya's savior, and attached himself to the man that healed them both, Disciple Marcus, who took the young children under his wing and into the folds of the church. Alexander spent his teenage years as a layman in the service of the Imperial cult, and before long, Kyne became Kenrith, Alduin became Akatosh, and Shor became Shazar. But the cult gave him identity and strength, a sense of community, which the plague had stripped from him all those years ago. And this life suited him, but Freya became restless. She was so much like her mother, she wanted to see the world beyond the temple walls and breathe fresh air out in the wilds. Alexander tried to show her how a peaceful life can be a meaningful life, but his words fell on deaf ears. 10 years after the plague, a new acolyte came to town, Acolyte Nero. He was a charismatic young man and gained a following of confidants quickly. His sermons were full of fire and vigor, preaching of developing a greater connection to the gods beyond the confines of the temple and the doctrine of the church. Freya immediately fell into this Nero's fold, but Alexander found him unsettling. Something about the eyes. There was a hunger to them, a hunger that no man of the gods should have. So Alexander, an acolyte himself now, went to Disciple Marcus and told him of his misgivings. Marcus placed a soothing hand on Alexander's shoulder, alleviating his concerns. Acolyte Nero was just impassioned, he said. The council in Cyrodil sent him here specifically, and we must trust in the words of the council. With a paternal smile, he asked Alexander to pray for guidance, the guidance of Kenrith, and peace would come to him. Alexander did as he was told, but no peace came. That night, Acolyte Nero had taken his congregation into the woods to better commune with the Divines under the light of Macer and Secunda. This had happened before, and the flock would return by sunrise. But this time, they did not. This time, Freya was among them. Alexander could no longer wait for peace, could no longer wait for someone else to be his savior. He rummaged through his mother's old things and pulled out her blade, a shining silver long blade passed from his grandmother and her mother before. Steeling himself with both faith and mettle, Alexander set out into the wilderness to find his sister and bring her home. When he was a boy, his mother taught him to track game, and he put those skills to good use. Footsteps led from the town into the wilds, stopping at the entrance of a dark cavern. But through his faith, no darkness could halt his march. Descending into the depths of the cavern, Alexander could hear unnatural sounds, whispers in the dark saying, "Death, death, death." Suddenly he was set upon by dark figures with piercing red eyes, bone walkers, draugr, creatures from bedtime stories and myth. With blade in hand and divine righteousness flowing through him, Alexander struck down the undead, his mother's silver sword gleaming in the darkness. Once the last of the draugr fell, Alexander could collect himself. He examined his assailants more closely, and to his horror, he recognized them. They were the missing members of the congregation, his own people. But what of Freya? Where was she? Amongst the bodies, he saw the familiar blonde braids of his beloved sister, but on the corpse of a creature that he struck down not moments ago. Laughter erupted from the cavern as Acolyte Nero stepped out from the shadows. The hunger in his eyes now radiated from him, and Alexander knew him for the monster that he was. Nero explained that he did want the congregation to be closer to God. His God. Mannimarco, the king of worms. And now Alexander would join his flock, like all the others. Nero cast out a spell of repugnant magic, engulfing Alexander in wicked energy. But to both men's shock, nothing happened. For you see, the gods were indeed on Alexander's side this day, for he had been born under the sign of the Atronach, and Nero's foul magic would not fell him this day. Leaping forward, Alexander plunged his blade into the necromancer, and watched as the hunger finally left the man's eyes. Alexander then began searching through the wicked man's belongings, looking for something, anything, that could reverse the evil magic that had been done to his people, to Freya. He found nothing of the sort, except for a letter from Disciple Marcus. The letter read that Marcus had suspected Nero had been practicing black magic, and that he should repent his sins, lest he bring shame to the name of the Imperial cult. Marcus, the man that had been like a father to Alexander, he knew. He knew. He knew. With a fury of divine retribution seething in his blood, Alexander stalked back to town and into Disciple Marcus's private quarters. "My son, what brings you here at this late hour?" Disciple Marcus asked. But no words were spoken from Alexander. With one swift motion, he plunged his blade through Disciple Marcus up to the hilt. The shocked face of the old man met the cold eyes of the young before the light left them both. The Imperial Guard was quick to the scene, and Alexander offered no resistance. While he expected an execution, he was instead committed for life in the Imperial prison in Cyrodil. Perhaps it was affiliation with the church, perhaps it was something else that stayed his execution. For 20 years, Alexander stayed in those dungeons, until one day he was put aboard a ship headed for Morrowind, at the behest of the Emperor himself. Alexander, his faith shattered and body weathered, must set out in a new land filled with the same horrors that destroyed his life all those years ago. But this time, things will be different. A dream had come to him in his sleep aboard the ship. A lost blade, destined for the hands of one empowered by the divines, one destined for redemption. The blade rests in the clutches of the unworthy, and with this blade he may reform his faith once more. So now we've got a good idea of the mindset of our character, a man who has lost his faith and looked evil right in the eye. Someone who's trying to start anew and defeat not only the evils of his past, but also the ones that walk the land that he has now found himself in. But of course, your character is yours to do with as you please. But this backstory and mindset I think helps set the Paladin up for an amazing story in the land of Vvardenfell. For quests and factions, we're definitely going to want to do the main quest, as defeating the undead ash vampires of Dagoth Ur will fall directly into our motivations of destroying the undead and keeping people safe from being turned into the abominations of House Dagoth, just like Alexander's sister and his fellow Kinnereth worshippers. We're also going to want to do the two DLCs, both Tribunal and Blood Moon. The events of the Tribunal DLC will fit nicely into our character as it pertains to rooting out corruption within a Dunmer religion and freeing the people of Morrowind from a god gone insane. Blood Moon will be the final chapter in our character's story. As a Nord, traveling to Solstheim will allow us to become reconnected with Kyne, the Nordic pantheon, and the true Nord way that we lost during our youth. Perhaps reconnecting with our past and the old gods will heal the scars that still wrap around our soul, especially if we can save the Skull people from an ancient curse. As far as factions that we should join, there are plenty to choose from. The Fighters Guild will fit our warriors aesthetic nicely and will provide access to skill trainers for our relevant martial skills. You'll want to avoid quests that have dubious or outright bad intentions as you progress through the ranks, though. The Mage's Guild will be a solid pick considering our reliance on magical abilities. Plus, it will grant us access to trainers, spellmaking, and certain quest rewards that will be very helpful, but I'll explain relevant gear later on in the video. Most of the quests are relatively neutral when it comes to morality, but you can certainly avoid certain quests that require nefarious actions or justify it as a necessity to gain access to powers needed to defeat greater evils. This Paladin isn't your typical knight in shining armor type who can do no wrong. He's gotten his hands dirty before, and knows that sometimes there's a price to pay to defeat the horrors that lurk in the shadows. As for the great houses, the only choice is really House Redoran. The Paladin wouldn't quite work with House Telvanni and House Lalu. Their actions are either too morally gray or downright awful to justify. House Redoran is more focused on honor and the ways of the warrior, which falls in line with their Paladin. However, the great houses are also pretty okay with slavery, so that's something you're going to have to bear in mind. You can roleplay this as once you become the leader of the house, you can abolish the practice or actually free the slaves yourself in-game. However, if this is a bit of a reach for you, you can certainly save the great houses for a different playthrough. The Imperial Legion would be a decent choice too, especially considering the rewards at the end of the questline. However, I opted against this during my playthrough as it didn't feel quite right considering the backstory, but I can definitely see a character needing to have more of a rigid system and set goals to start life over again after spending years in prison. The Imperial cult can go two ways. Perhaps our Paladin wants to revitalize their faith, and can step back into that role of a Kinnereth worshipper again. The quest rewards are also very fitting for our character. However, with the backstory I've mentioned, I opted against this faction, wanting to rediscover myself through my own journey and trials against the forces of evil. But again, each character is yours to do with as you wish, and you can absolutely justify doing this faction. For the Tribunal Temple, Thieves Guild, and Morag Tong factions, I would personally not do them in this playthrough. As a Nord and follower of Kyne, the Temple of the Tribunal is just too far removed from his own religious beliefs and too closely associated with Daedra worship. That doesn't mean he can't respect the Dunmer people's faith. There are shrines to the saints of the Tribunal Church throughout the ruins and burial chambers of Morrowind, and will want to utilize them to restore a magicka. Therefore, respecting what the Tribunal Temple means to the people of Morrowind is fine, but we don't necessarily want to be an active member of their organization. The Thieves Guild and Morag Tong just don't fit thematically with a Paladin, nor do the skill set that these factions require align with our build setup. I'd save those for a different playthrough. Alright folks, you've got everything you need to give this build a go, but there are certain pieces of gear that will set you up for success, and with just a bit of work we can get them at the beginning of the game. A minor spoiler alert for the Mage's Guild and Legion going forward. These pieces are totally optional, although I would highly recommend the sword I've been carrying around with me in this video. as it's known as Chrysamere, the Paladin's blade, and it really ties the build's themes and playstyles together. This sword is the final reward for the Imperial Legion, but we can actually get it right at the beginning of the game. But before we do, we'll need to gather some other pieces of gear and a few items. The next part of the video will be a step-by-step guide on how to obtain each piece of gear that you'll need for your entire playthrough. Let's start at the beginning, right after character creation in Seyda-Neen. We're going to want some cash at the beginning, so grab the limewire platter in the Excise office by placing it into your inventory and then immediately dropping it. The guards will only reprimand you and you can then pick it back up. Then head to the adjacent storeroom and grab everything that you can, just to sell later. Yes, this is a bit dishonorable and this is technically thievery, but this is more of a setup than anything else. You can absolutely get coin from some light questing or guild quest if you want RP as a paladin right away and avoid thievery completely. Grab the ring in the barrel outside the office, and after getting our orders from the Legion officer, hand the ring over to the wood elf outside, Fargoth. This will give us a disposition increase at the local shop run by Ariel, meaning we can sell our loot for better prices. Speaking of, stop by the watchtower and grab the axe hidden in the stump outside, as well as the skill book and other loot inside the tower. Now, head over to Ariel's and sell off any loot you just grabbed. Then purchase the heavy armor available from Ariel, but not any chest armor or helmets. We'll be getting those later on. Be sure to buy some spells from him as well, specifically the destruction spells and the Jack of Trade spell, which will be essential for our custom spells later on. While we're wandering around town, it's a good idea to grab some mushrooms that Ajira, a member of the Mages Guild, will need. There are 4 kinds: Luminous, Rusala, Violet, Coprimus, Bungler's Bane, and Hypha Fascia. Now head up the road north of town, where you'll see an elf falling from the sky. Hello again, Tahil, you little Icarus. Grab the scrolls off his body, as well as his long blade and hat. The long blade will be our primary weapon for the time being, and the hat is just too sexy to pass up. Just west of the path is the Samaris Ancestral Tomb, which is the first major piece of gear we'll need for our build. There are a few undead in there, but you should be able to make quick work of them with your sword. At the end of the tomb is an urn that is trapped with a magical enchantment. You can go ahead and open it, then cast Hearth Heal to heal any damage inflicted by the trap. Then grab the Mentor's Ring, which provides a constant Fortify Intelligence and Willpower buff of 10 points. Finally, there's the body of the local tax collector just south of the tomb. You can follow a short quest to determine who his killer is, or you can just take the money. Up to you and when you really want to start the RP of this build, because this isn't probably the most honorable thing on the planet. Okay, now let's take the Silt Strider over to Balmora. Once you get to town, it's a good idea to loot the various crates, urns, and barrels around the place. They'll have some gold, potions, and sometimes enchanted gear. Hey, look, we found a longsword that's going to be a decent little upgrade from our current weapon. Now we should report to Caius, our contact with the blades, and the next step in the main quest. He'll give you gold and a new set of orders, but more importantly, he'll mention some blades agents in the city that are going to offer training services. They are Tyre Malin, Rithleen, and Nine Toes. Each person when spoken to about blade training will offer some free gear or loot, and Rithleen will give you a steel helmet and a cuirass. You can stop at the local armorer shop to pick up any missing pieces of equipment for a full set of heavy armor. Well, except for the pauldrons, but you two needs to see Alexander's traps anyways. Now head over to Nalcaria's alchemy shop on the northwestern side of town. We'll want to buy some alchemy gear so we can craft potions. You see, in Morrowind, to be better able to make potions, you'll need 4 pieces of gear: a mortar and pestle, an alembic, a calcinator, and a retort. You can bring one of these items into your character screen to bring up the alchemy menu. Check out my full alchemy and enchant video for more details on how alchemy works and how to make really OP potions. Just so you know, you can actually steal some very powerful versions of these tools from the Caldera Mages Guild. Totally up to you on where you want to draw the line with stealing loot. Hop over to the shop next door and grab the flowers that Millie Hastian has in her planner for yet another Mages Guild quest. You'll have to steal these too, but plants honestly should be for everyone. Just block Millie's view with a pole, crouch, and nab. These flowers also just grow outside of Balmora if you want to pick them without the fear of property damage charges. Now let's join some guilds. First up is the Fighters Guild, right in the center of town. After joining up, be sure to loot the Restore Health and Fatigue potions from the guild chest, and you can knock out some of the intro quests for some easy gold right away. Afterwards, join up with the Mages Guild, located right next door, and loot the potions and scrolls located in the guild chest, especially the Restore Magicka potions. Remember, we can't naturally regenerate Magicka. Go downstairs and talk to the Khajiit Ajira, and do all of her quests, which we needed the mushrooms and flowers for. She'll give solid potions as rewards for these quests, and we can use them later on to obtain our other gear. We'll also want to buy Rising Force potions from her, aka Levitation potions, and both crab meat and hound meat. These ingredients are needed to make Restore Fatigue potions, and we can easily train our alchemy by making tons of them. Ajira is also a restocking merchant, so she'll always have these items for sale, and if you sell them back to her, she restocks to the new larger amount of materials. Masscraft Restore Fatigue potions to level up alchemy, sell some back to her for additional money, and then keep some handy for combat. Fatigue is directly tied to our success rate in the dice roll calculations, so we want to have it topped off at all times. Otherwise, we won't be able to hit our targets with melee attacks or successfully cast spells. Later on, we'll want to craft some Restore Magicka potions as well. The most easily obtained ingredients are probably Calmberry and Frost Salts, sold by both Ajira and Nalkaria in Balmora. We'll be okay on Restore Magicka potions for now, but as you get more gold and level up alchemy, you want to make your own potions, as they will outclass anything that you can find pretty quickly. While we're in the Mages Guild, let's create some custom spells. We'll start with the base versions of the two that we'll most absolutely need, both involving Fortify Strength. For our first Fortify Strength spell, I'm naming it Divine Smite 1, for thematic purposes and to keep track of my spells. This will increase our strength on cast by 15 to 25 points for 30 seconds, increasing our long blade damage output. We'll want to make more powerful versions of the spell throughout our playthrough as we level up Restoration. An important note is that spell buffs stack if applied from different sources, so you can cast a few versions of Divine Smite for even more strength enhancement. We'll also want to make some low-cost Fortify Strength spells that I will call Restoration Training. We want something that we can easily cast and repeatedly cast to get Restoration XP. It's a good idea to do this next to a shrine so that we can easily refill our magicka. Okay, we're all done with Balmora for now, so let's talk to the Mages Guild Guild Guide and teleport over to the city of Aldrune, so that we can get a set of very, very important amulets that are going to make traveling a breeze. At the bottom of the Aldrune Mages Guild, talk to a woman named Edwina Elbert. She'll have a short series of quests for you to do that will reward you with an amulet of Almsavi Intervention and an amulet of Divine Intervention. These amulets allow you to cast the aforementioned spells, which will instantly teleport you to the nearest Tribunal Temple for Almsavi Intervention or Imperial Shrine for Divine Intervention, greatly helping you travel around the world, as there is no fast traveling outside of teleportation magic, boats, and Siltstrider taxis. Use the Mages Guild to teleport over to the town of Caldera next. Now there's a merchant here called Creeper that will make buying and selling quite easy, but it's a bit too easy for my taste. Feel free to buy and sell to him if you'd like, as he has a huge gold pool and buys everything at full price. Check out my Alchemy and Enchant guide for how to perform what's called the Creeper Shuffle to max out earnings from your loot. We actually came here to visit the shop of Varric Germain. He sells a few items that will be quite useful to us at the beginning of our run. The Amulet of Mighty Blows, which allows us to buff our strength on cast, similar to our Divine Smite spell but with no risk of the spell failing. The Ring of Lightning Bolt and the Ring of Fireball, which allows us to cast both spells without using our own magicka. Velos the Robe, which allows us to cast a healing spell that won't use our magicka and is great for some really tight moments where you really need a backup plan. And finally, and most important of all, the Amulet of Recall, which allows us to cast Recall on ourselves. But we need its sister spell, Mark, which creates an anchor point anywhere we want to in the world that we can then teleport back to. And there's only one place to get it in the entire game. Teleport back to Balmora. Take the Siltstrider over to Vivec, and then walk down to the boat docked nearby. We can take that boat to the fishing village of Narmak, where just west of the town is the cave of Shurimbal. It is absolutely filled with smugglers. Fight through them all using your Amulet of Mighty Blows, Divine Smite spells, and any potions you have on hand that are going to increase your strength stat. Don't forget about using Destruction Magic on long-range enemies just to soften them up a bit. On the body of Galtis Serethi, you'll find the Amulet of Mark. Be sure to loot all the crates for valuable loot. Specifically, there are tons of scrolls of Ondusi's Unhinging, which allow you to unlock any lock level 50 or below, and scrolls of Figgy's Gem Feeder, which allow you to cast Soul Trap on target. We won't be filling soul gems much, so these scrolls can be sold for a solid profit. Also, you might just be attacked by Dark Brotherhood assassins. This is from the Tribunal DLC, and assassins can randomly attack you anytime you're resting. You have to progress through that DLC to stop the attacks. However, their armor is very valuable and can be sold off for even more money. This can be, I guess, seen as exploitative, I suppose, but a paladin killing off assassins feels alright to me. These funds can be used to purchase spells, spell scrolls, potions, training, or really anything else you need. Okay, now we have our travel abilities sorted out, so let's move on to some additional enchanted items. Cast Almsavi Intervention and you'll teleport back to Balmora. Take the Siltstrider over to the town of Nissus, where just southeast along the river, you'll find the Phallus Ancestral Tomb. Inside, there will be a few Daedra, but if you go here early enough, there will only be very low-level enemies that you can defeat with ease. At the end of the tomb in a trapped urn is Dinstagmer's Ring, which gives you a constant effect of 30% resist fire, frost, and shock, which, coupled with our racial resistances, gives us a huge elemental damage buffer. Alright folks, it's finally time. We're gonna go get the sword that will be our main weapon for the entire playthrough, Chrysamere, the Paladin's Blade. Cast Almsavi Intervention to get back to Nissus, then take the Siltstrider over to Aldrune. Head to the Mages Guild and teleport to the Wolverine Hall in Sadrith Mora. From there, head southwest from town, fighting sea creatures along the way, until you reach the cave of Abanabi. Hey, what's a nabi with you? I shouldn't keep that. Inside will be tough enemies, so you may want to come back at a higher level or when you're more comfortable with the combat, but it's totally doable level 1 or 2, which is about where I'm at right now. You'll be facing rogue mages, their summons, and various Daedra scattered across the cave. Be sure to loot all chests you can, because there should be some very powerful spell scrolls in this cave that we can use later on. Finally, we'll face Joramu Hlorin, who carries the blade Chrysamere. You'll need to watch out for her summon, a Greater Bone Walker, because their attacks damage your strength attribute, and you'll need a shrine, a potion, or a spell of Restore Strength to return your stat to normal. Remember, strength is tied to your damage and your carrying capacity, so having it lowered by a lot is incredibly bad. My suggestion is to take a few Rising Force potions, levitate above her and her summon, and rain down long-range spell attacks from your rings or spells. She defaults to using her sword, and her summon will probably fall into the water, rendering it basically harmless. Once they're defeated, grab the Paladin's blade off her body, and be sure to loot her other things for valuable items. Alright, we're almost done, but we need our final set of gear. An almost complete set of Ebony Armor, some of the highest rated heavy armor in the entire game. Let's Divine Intervention back to Wolverine Hall, where we can then use the Mage's Guild to teleport over to Balmora. No need for a helmet for this one, we need to look danger right in the eyes. Take the Silt Strider over to the town of Kuhl, and head southwest for just a bit until you see a large Daedric ruin, the ruin of Ashel Mawia, and way down at the bottom is our prize. We'll need to fight our way past a few Daedra at the entrance, as well as some disgruntled worshippers within the ruins themselves, but they're no match for Chrysamere. Oh, wow, pauldrons! Now we can cover our shoulders so YouTube doesn't demonetize this video. Just kidding, I don't make a dime from this. Yet! Like and subscribe, baby! Sorry about that. We'll head left from the entrance into the sunken vaults where we'll be assaulted by a Dunmer named Gordel, the owner of the Ebony Armor. Well, soon to be our Ebony Armor. Luckily, he's stuck on the other side of the ruins with no direct way to get to you and no long-range form of attack. So we can just rain down spell attacks from various spell scrolls we've picked up, our magic rings, and our own spell pool until he's absolutely toast. He's got a lot of health, so this might take a little while. Once he's defeated, we can take the armor and the extremely valuable Daedric axe that he carries. Be warned, this is all very, very heavy, and you may need to leave some stuff behind to carry it all. You can also have a mark set up at the Mage's Guild Hall in Balmora to teleport back to once you've got everything in your inventory. You can then place everything on the ground so that you can freely move. Items placed on the ground in Morrowind don't despawn, so you can just leave your stuff wherever. And with that, you've got everything you need for an incredibly powerful Paladin character, from stats, backstory, roleplay, playstyle, and gear. Please let me know what you thought in the comments. I try to read them all to see what all you liked and what I can do better on, and what I should incorporate to my next video. But hey, as long as I can get folks into playing this game, that's good enough for me. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and of course, wealth beyond measure, my fellow Outlanders.